as you can see, we made it to Sweden. It's been a long road, but we're now deep in the islands to the west of the big island of Orust in western Sweden, north of Gothenburg. It looks like I'm having a chat with an old shipmate here, but actually I'm in a boat museum on a little island called Bassholmen, which is, I don't know, way out at the bottom of a really intricate sound between rocks and islands that we've had to thread our way through. At one point we only had about 2 feet under us, and it's rocks everywhere. But the place is well marked. These little channels are good. I'll try and do a blog from one later on in the summer. And we worked our way through. The boat's now anchored in perfect shelter, and I'm in an ancient boat shed where they were building ships until quite recently. The place fell into disrepute, and the owner sort of lost his marbles a bit, really, and it all fell apart. And the people of the town have taken it on, they've bought it, and they've presented it now as a museum. The curator, who I've just been talking to, said that when he was a nipper, he's about my age, when he was a nipper, he used to come in here and play with the tools. The place was derelict and everything was still here. But of course, things started to disappear pretty rapidly, and the right thing was done, and now we have a fine museum. And the reason why I've wanted to do this blog was because of this boat here, which is actually, it's not really a Swedish boat. It's a Northlands boat from Norway, way up the west coast. They call them, I can't pronounce it really, Northlands Boat. It is, and it's interesting. Boat, the way they pronounce it, is a bit like they pronounce boat in Newcastle on Tyne, which of course, as everybody knows, is full of people of Viking extraction. And when you look at this boat, you can see this is not that dissimilar from the boats which came forging across the North Sea on the northeast wind in the springtime to get what they could out of the British Isles and then go home again. And ultimately, of course, to colonise. But the boat itself, these boats have been operating for hundreds of years on the west coast of Norway. They're finished now, of course, they're museum pieces. But when I first went to Norway in 1982, I went on one of these. It was a bigger one, a bigger version called a Fembering. It had a little cabin at the back, and we all crawled into there and all slept sort of as one in a great big bunk. It was extremely friendly and could be quite adventurous. But it was, well, what it was. But it had no engine, of course, as this boat doesn't, and you rowed it, or if the wind was going your way, you sailed it. And I just want to talk to you a bit about this sail, because it tells you a lot about square sails. When you look at it, it just looks like a square of canvas. That's it. Obviously it'll blow the boat downwind, and we all imagine Viking ships being blown downwind very nicely. But what happened when the wind wasn't favourable? Could you reach? Could you even work to windward? Well, actually, with this sort of boat, you can. You don't point very high, but you see, there are no shrouds on this mast, so there's nothing stopping the yard from being braced right round, almost fore and aft, when the wind's not favourable. And the really clever thing is this. The problem with square sails always is getting the luff tight, the front edge, the edge that's cutting the wind, getting it tight. You see pictures of old galleons and sailing ships, and the sail's always bellied out like a lady who's expecting her child. Very romantic, but no way to get to windward. But these guys had it sorted. The tack was pulled down very hard. This sail, because of space and everything, is not hoisted as high as it might have been. But the really interesting thing is they knew about tight luffs. And these here, on these little kringles, they're not reef kringles, they're called Bowline Kringles, and this is called the Bowline. And it runs through a block on the big stem head here, and when the boat was going to windward, they pulled the luff of the sail out tight, bows down on the luff, heaved down on the sheet to keep the yard at the right angle, and they had themselves an aerofoil, and the boat would work to windward within the limits of her keel. But because she's long and narrow and has a very straight keel, so long as you keep her moving, she doesn't make that much leeway. And certain types of Viking ship would do the same. Certainly the Cunliffe, the trading ship, would be able to make some ground to windward like that. Maybe not the warships with their very low freeboard, but the classier sailing vessels could. So there we are, the Northlands Boat with its wonderful mainsail. And I'm going on about what it does really and how it worked and everything. This might be a fishing vessel. Typically that's what they were used for. There was a lot of loss of life in them actually, but they kept on going. But To me, the wonderful thing about it is just the sheer beauty of it. I mean, the sheer unadulterated beauty. I can't believe everything in this shape of this boat is purely for pragmatic reasons. Sometimes it's got to just do it for the look of it, and my goodness me, doesn't that look like a boat should look?